Welcome once again to the Icons. I'm your host, the sports professor Rick Horrow. This month we have a guest that couldn't be more timely. Executive Director of the College Football Playoff, Bill Hancock. Let's get started by going inside the Icon. Bill Hancock was born on September 9, 1950 in Hobart, Oklahoma. His father was the owner and publisher of the town newspaper. His mother was a piano teacher and church organist. Hancock graduated from the University of Oklahoma in 1971 with a degree in journalism. His sports career started in sports information for the Sooners and continues for more than 5 decades later. Hancock has achieved a rare trifecta in college sports. He was the first full-time director of the Final Four, the first executive director of the Bowl Championship Series, and the first executive director of the College Football Playoff. Hancock's been married to his high school sweetheart, Nikki, since 1968. One of their 2 sons, Will, was tragically killed in the crash of the Oklahoma State basketball team plane in 2001. Hancock took a cross-country bicycle journey after his son's death, writing a book about the experience called Riding with the Blue Moth. Bill Hancock announced in June he would step down from the CFP when his contract expires in 2025. So I think it's a classic job preparation, define your niche. The first director of the Final Four basketball tournament, the first executive director of the BCS in 2005, the first director of the College Football Playoff that started in 2012, and now the first director of the newfangled College Football Playoff Association, 12 games. I don't know what the acronym is, but you certainly have defined that niche, and college football is the better for it. How did this kind of, when did you know that you were destined to be that guy?
Oh man, Rick, I'll tell you, I've just been so lucky. Right place at right time. Maybe some of it is because I cared about people and was interested in people, but I just think mostly it's just that it was right place at right time because there was a million people who could have done the jobs that I've been lucky enough to do in my career.
Well, I know that is Oklahoma humility, and frankly, I've heard that before from a lot of people who have defined their industries and talk about luck. I'm sure there's a little bit to do with that, but not a lot. And when you think about the first writing that I saw, I guess in 2009, when you had a little bit of a head start and you knew you had to have a college football playoff, BCS was there clearly, but the responsibility for you as I read it was, all right, you got a little bit of time. You got to cut and finish the TV deals. You got to get the bowl games in tow. You've got to get the host cities to cooperate. You've got to get the sponsors on board. You've got to hire staff. You got to get office space. You got to create a selection committee. You got to create the protocol for that selection committee, and you've got to survive and thrive. How'd you take that job and how'd you do it?
I don't think anybody will ever have the opportunity that I had as the only staff member, being asked by the conference commissioners to start the CFP up. And yeah, you nailed it. Get a staff, get an office, work with a committee, get protocol. And it was just an awesome opportunity. I probably should have been scared, Rick. I don't know if I knew enough to be scared.
Well, so then you look to your left, you look to your right on your first day of the staff meeting in November 2012. Oh, but wait, there's no staff. You're the only one there.
We had really short staff meetings.
I'm sure. But so the presumption at that point, 11 years ago, was let's try it. It's going to work. It's long overdue. Something has to happen. Is it that, look, the big guys are still going to dominate, and I don't care what anybody does. We've got to figure out how to level the playing field first before we get into this, and it's the right process, maybe the wrong time. Was it a combination of all of that, or was everybody rowing in the right direction?
You know, they were all rowing in the right direction, and these are my bosses. These are the conference commissioners and also the university presidents who were on our board. They knew that the time had come for a playoff. I will also say this, we wouldn't have the CFP today if we hadn't had those 16 years of the BCS. And so the groundwork got laid in the BCS days, and we just kept moving on ahead with the playoff.
When was there a discussion? I'm sure there was one all the time as far as let's get as many teams in as we can. This guy was involved in the Final Four, so we certainly knew that there was an opportunity to do 64 to 68 teams. We're not going to do in football, but we got to think about all of that. When did the noise get so prolific that the conversations started that not whether we're going to have more than four, but when?
And I'm thinking out loud here, but what happened was our board met on the day of the championship game out in Santa Clara. And the presidents from the Big Ten and the Pac-12, the representatives of the Big Ten and the Pac-12, asked their colleagues to see if there wasn't some way to have more teams. And that's really when it all began. And we got started on the process, and then we got stopped by COVID, like everything else did, and then picked it back up again to the point where the board met in January of 2022 in Indianapolis, again on the day of the championship game. And there was put forward the notion of expanding to 12, but it took all the conferences to be willing to do it. And 3 of the conferences that day said, no, we're not ready. And so everybody else said, boy, we're making a mistake here. We need to expand. But those 3 were just not ready. So it really goes back to the Big Ten and the Pac-12 asking back in the January of 2019 if it wasn't time to make some changes. And then it was ironic, wasn't it, that the Big Ten and the Pac-12 were 2 of the conferences who ultimately voted against expanding. People do have to represent their own parochial interests, but also at the same time they have to do what's best for the game. And we saw that in the creation of the BCS before I got here. And certainly we saw it in the creation of the 14 playoff, that everybody said, what is in the best interest of all of college football?
The playbook was handed to you by the conference commissioners and presidents, or have you had to kind of define the playbook relative to how to allocate the New Year Six and what happens with the others? And, what do you do with the sponsors, et cetera, et cetera? How much entrepreneurialism is there now?
Well, this all comes from our board. This all comes from the university presidents. Staff can make recommendations to the commissioners, and the commissioners make recommendations to the board, but it is the board that makes the decisions. Now, some of the details will be filled in by the staff, but the major things like, what's the format? And as you know, we came out with 6 conference champions and then 6 at-large teams, which will now be under debate given the unfortunate loss of the Pac-12 or change in the Pac-12. I'll say that. But this event is run by the conference representatives who are university presidents.
How many? You can't give me an exact answer, but this is metaphorical almost. How many contracts did you have to look through, read / memorize / know over the last 3-4 years in terms of putting all of these deals together? You had all the bowls, not just the Big Six. You had the other ones. You had all the sponsor contracts as they related to the bowls, and you had all the teams and conferences as they related to who's in them and what you do with the host cities, et cetera. So is it over 100 contracts? Is it over 200?
Well,
it's a lot.
Here's an interesting thing, Rick, because the contracts with the bowls will continue.
Yeah.
So we continue on our same rotation with the Rose and Sugar, of course, having semifinals this year. And next year it's the Cotton and Orange with semifinals, and the year after that, the Fiesta and Peach. So those contracts are still in place, and ESPN has a contract to have the 7 games, so that they own the quarterfinals rights and semifinal rights, at least for the first 2 years of the expanded playoff. So in terms of lawyers getting to make a lot of money off of us as we put the 12-team tournament together, it didn't really come out that way.
go somewhere else. It's got to be really disappointing for my profession to look at the
Sorry, Rick.
pickings here.
Sorry, Rick.
Yeah, I'll go somewhere else. That's okay. That's not a problem. We always have year two after the first round of contracts expire. Here we go. But obviously, you put together a hell of a structure because you couldn't have it any other way. Looking back and not betraying any confidences, what was the most difficult thing that happened or that that you had to overcome between the time the conference commissioners basically gave you a kind of a green light to put this all together and let's say today?
Well, between the time, if you think about this, the university presidents decided a year ago to expand. I mean,
Right.
literally a year ago, September of 22, to expand the CFP, and they asked the commissioners to expand the CFP starting in 2026. And they asked the commissioners if they would take a look at trying to start early. And I mean, the little duck feet under the water began to pedal, pedal, pedal as we worked on with the commissioners under their leadership on whether we could expand early. And it was 1st of December, 10 months ago, when we decided, yes, we can expand early and we will do it. And we will do it. And as you said, starting in December of 2024.
I guess one of the primary reasons why the paddling went in the same direction was that everybody felt that for different reasons, maybe the time had come and the idea of self-interest is important, but it had to give way at some point to the greater good, and the greater good was putting together a series of games that everybody looks forward to come December 20 of a year and a half from now. Is that essentially right? And we talked about it moving in the same direction, but it also helps solve problems when everybody is trying to solve the same problems in the same way.
Well, that is so true, Rick. And this is my 19th season in working with this group on college football, dating back to the BCS. And I've seen it happen time after time after time where people do have to represent their own parochial interests, but also at the same time, they have to do what's best for the game. And we saw that in the creation of the BCS before I got here. And certainly we saw it in the creation of the 14 playoff, that everybody said, what is in the best interest of all of college football? And not everybody got everything they wanted when the CFP was created, but everybody got something. And I think that needs to be the story of our lives moving forward. People love college football. They are passionate about their teams. And more so, I think, also, let me say, passionate about the game at large. The fans are still with us, and I just don't see anything to change that.
Let's shift gears for a second and talk about the business of college football broadly defined. Obviously, your day job is to set this up as a playoff system above reproach, but just some comments, as much as you care to, about where the business is going. Let's call it conference musical chairs, and the history of where the conferences are. We went through a lot of this 10 years ago. We're going through it again. What's your sense of where that is and where it's going to end up?
Well, this game is thriving, and all you had to do was look on television in the last 3 weekends and see all those fans in those stadiums. People love college football. They are passionate about their teams, and more so, I think, also, let me say, passionate about the game at large. The fans are still with us, and I just don't see anything to change that. Sure, we have some things to work through in the game of college football, but my goodness, it's so enormously popular and continues to grow.
Do you think we will have a process, without telling me what you think the details will be? Think we'll have a process with all of the folks, Commissioner President Baker and Tom McMillan on the lead side, and some of the other folks, and weighing in from their perspective to find some happy medium relative to certainty on NIL and the transfer portal and all of those things that are turbulent today. Not good, not bad, but turbulent. What's your assessment on process?
Yeah, I think so. We are just dipping our toes into both NIL and the transfer portal. Um, the pendulum, if you will, tends to swing a certain direction in all of our society. And college sports is not immune to that. So we have the pendulum on NIL and the portal having swung a certain direction. But I suspect there will be a leveling. I don't know. I don't know what the ultimate answer is. I do know that that having different rules in different states is not going to work.
Right.
To have Texas sitting on the west sideline and Florida State sitting on the east sideline, and they're playing under different rules, that is not going to work. So, but I think folks realize that. I think all of us are where we're saying, I can't believe we're talking to Congress and asking for help here, but it's pretty clear that we have benefited from a national system of rules for a long time, playing rules and eligibility rules both, and that we need to continue with that. I told an athletic director last fall I was as concerned about gambling as I was about anything else, and he said, no, that's wrong. Set that aside.
The big difference between college sports today, I think, and some of the other professional sports is they have a capability, because they're an entity, that they can regulate themselves should they choose and want. It's very difficult among the conference structure today to come up with a series of rules absent federal regulation. And on the gaming side as well, I assume what you're talking about is some kind of a top-down way to deal with NIL, but also we had that issue in gambling and gaming as well. You feel some of the same issues there?
I do. I told an athletic director last fall I was as concerned about gambling as I was about anything else, and he said, no, that's wrong. Set that aside. But I followed the scandals that happened in gambling and the real damage those did to the credibility of certainly college basketball, but also college football and then the pros. So I worry a lot about gambling. But I do hear people say, and I believe this, that there are more controls, more people kind of watching what's happening now than there were 40 years ago. And I'm comforted by that somewhat. But we really need to keep an eye on that.
And some of the technical companies like Prohibit and all of those companies that the conferences are dealing with to try to regulate betting as well. You asked that athletic director, by the way, today, if he feels the same way about put gambling to the side. I bet you might get a little bit of a different response, but that's yeah, we might. Here's another issue. So kind of taking a little bit of this away, you've been in your day job for 50 years. Obviously, after February 25, you're not going out to pasture. You're consulting with the new executive director in this whole new world. But is there anything we can do to talk you out of leaving?
I've had a great career, and as I mentioned before, I've been so lucky. And I have some bucket list things, some travel, some writing I want to do. People don't know that in high school I was a piano player, and if you went back to talk to my high school people, a lot of them would say, Hancock, is that the piano player? And I want to hone my piano skills a little more. I want to learn the computer better. I want to learn how to do Photoshop. Man, there's so much out there, so many books to read. I probably like you, Rick, I've probably got 40 books sitting on my nightstand waiting for me to get at them, and another 15 on my Kindle, but not enough time.
Yeah, but you may have touched 3 or 4, and I haven't touched any. That's interesting. I'm told, by the way, from the mayor of Oklahoma City and others, and Joe Castiglione and all those folks, that you are the best. You were the best piano player in Hobart, Oklahoma. Is that correct?
Big fish, small pond.
Obviously, people should remember that fatal 2001 plane crash at Oklahoma State took many souls, including your son Will's. You did a bicycle journey after your son's death and then wrote about it. Do you mind talking about that for a second?
Yeah, just the heartbreak of that day will never go away. It's something you never imagine can happen, that your son would get on an airplane and it would crash. Um, I'm William Jr. and he was William the Third. We were very, very close. And there was a while when I wasn't sure I would be able to live again, be able to put my life back together. And somehow, some way, by just putting one foot in front of the other, and with a lot of help from friends in college athletics, we were able to get back on our feet. And I decided that life is pretty short. And whatever your bucket list is, don't keep putting it off. Don't keep sliding that bucket over to the side, but get it out and doing it. And one of my dreams was to see if I could ride my bicycle across the country. And so my wife and I drove out to California, and I put the rear wheel of my bike in the Pacific Ocean at Huntington Beach. And somehow, 36 days later, I put the front wheel of the bike in the Atlantic Ocean at Tybee Island, Georgia. It was a great adventure.
God bless you, and everybody ought to understand the significance behind that. Which one would you assess is more difficult, putting the football playoff together successfully or climbing Mount Rainier in 1994?
I thought I was in shape. I thought I was strong. I thought I was an athlete, and the mountain kicked my tail.